Hello LinkedIn, I'm back. I'm going to do a video today showcasing how to install MySQL on your Ubuntu server or really any other Debian based Linux headless server you may have online, either through AWS, Microsoft Azure, DigitalOcean, and whatever other service provider you're selecting. So let's get to it. Okay, so I created this architectural diagram in order to help you visualize exactly what is happening in your basic web app. So this is you or me or anybody sitting at their home computer. And we are going to SSH into our VM or OS. In order to SSH, we need an SSH client. Now, you can use PowerShell for Windows, Terminal for Mac or Linux, but today I'm going to focus on Putty. By the way, you could also use VS Code as an SSH client. I'll explain that later. So you're going to SSH into a headless server, right, which is a VM. In my case, it's in Ubuntu 18.04, but these are the other options. This VM OS can help you talk to your web server. In my case, it's going to be 2.4 Apache, but there are the other options. And you're going to be able to control the database through the VM. So you could literally write out SQL scripts and control the database, create tables, delete items, etc. But in this case, we're going to create an SSH tunnel using Putty. This SSH tunnel is going to communicate with MySQL Workbench, which is going to be installed locally. Remember, everything that's in the cloud is out there in the cloud. Everything on the left side of the cloud is local. So cloud providers include AWS, Azure, Google, DigitalOcean, et al. So this MySQL Workbench is going to be able, through an SSH tunnel created in Putty, to directly communicate with MySQL database on the cloud. So that's a pretty neat concept. Let's get to it. Okay, so I don't want to spend too much time doing this, but just as a refresher, let's log into our Amazon Web Services console. Now, you may have a different service provider, like I said before, Azure, DigitalOcean, etc. But I'm working out of Amazon, AWS. So AWS Management Console will automatically give me the option to go into Lightsail. Lightsail is where I'm storing my VMs. The reason I'm doing this in particular is to see what my IP address is. That's my IP address. You can actually copy it if you like. But in order to move forward, we need that IP address. Okay, now to install Putty. We're going to install Putty right now. So go to putty.org, Putty, Putty.org. And again, this is only for Windows or Linux-based systems, mostly for Windows. Once you land into putty.org, you can download Putty here. What I want you to do is install the full Putty package, which is found on these MSIs. So if you have a 32-bit, if you have a 64-bit, go ahead and install your version. Okay, now to download and install a MySQL Workbench. So we haven't installed MySQL on our VM yet, but let's install MySQL Workbench locally on our local machine. So we can go to dev.mysql.com/downloads/workbench. And you're going to get the option to install in any operating system you wish. At this point, you can download. Okay, so when you install Putty, Putty created a folder or asked you for a folder in the file system, and then it created a bunch of executables, a number of executables. I want to focus on two today. So putty.exe, which is our main executable, and puttygen.exe. We're going to go ahead and open puttygen right now. We're going to go ahead and convert one of the files. So we want to use conversions, import key, and then we want to find the key that we downloaded before from AWS or any other provider. So we go ahead and select that key, and now we can go ahead and save it as a Putty congruent file so that we're able to use it within Putty. So we go ahead and save private key, and it's going to ask us if we want to save it without a phrase. I do prefer to save it without a phrase. If you like a phrase, you can do that. And we're going to go ahead and save it as whatever the name, but Putty's going to create a .ppk extension. Okay, so next we're going to actually use Putty. So the putty.exe that I pointed to before, go ahead and double click that. That's going to open up our Putty instance. Now I've already had settings, I've already had sessions within Putty, but I'm going to go ahead and create a new one. Okay, so make sure you have a user, you have your user account. Mine is Alex, and we need our IP address. So this is the IP address I have, and that's exactly what I'm going to put, Alex at. There's other ways to do this, but this is really the simplest way. Alex at IP. I'm going to SSH in. Now we're not quite done yet. It's really not that difficult, but it's really not that simple. We're going to need an SSH command authorization. So that key that I asked you to transform from a .pem to a .ppk, we're going to need that key now. So I found mine. I go ahead and open. And now at this stage, we can go ahead and go to our session, and we can actually save this session and give it a name. Let's call it Ubuntu, just because I can't think of anything more clever. We're going to go ahead and save that session, and we're going to go ahead and open it. Now, I've already opened this session before using Putty, so what you're going to see is that it didn't ask me if it was an accepted server, but it might prompt you. You just want to type yes when it asks you if this server is accepted to you locally. So we're in. Okay, I'm not going to lie to you. The next part can get highly technical, and it's going to require you to invest some time and energy into reading how to administer the MySQL installation, at least initially. So first you could install MySQL. That's fairly straightforward. You could find articles all over. I got this one from TechMint. But after you install MySQL, you're going to have to create a user that can log in remotely. Create a user that can log in remotely. Once you have those two parameters set, we can go ahead and move on in the video. Okay, let's work with Putty again. So now we've installed our MySQL. We've created a remote user for MySQL, and we can start working with Putty to tunnel into the MySQL installation on our VM. So I saved a session called Ubuntu. I'm going to go ahead and load it. This is my Ubuntu user and IP address. And what I need to do right now is go into SSH tunnels. So we're going to add a tunnel, and I'm going to use a port that Windows does not use because this tunnel is local. I'll explain more in a second. 127.0.0.1 is the standard IP address for MySQL. 3306 is the port that MySQL listens in on. So 127.0.0.1:3306. We want to add that. We want to go back to the session, save that, and then go ahead and open the session. When we open the session, we can right click on this bar, see the event log, and we will see that is a tunnel. There's a tunnel created. Finally, let's connect. So let's remember that I have a session of Putty running in the background. This is the session that's connected and creating a tunnel. And now I'm going to create a new MySQL connection using MySQL Workbench. So the new connection is going to have the same host name, but we're going to change the port to 9090. If you remember, we changed our port in Putty, and we're going to have a non-root user. In my case, it's Alex. You can go ahead and save that MySQL password in the vault and name this connection Alex Ubuntu. Sorry, I'm not very imaginative. Hit OK, connect, and it's going to open up our VM MySQL.